My name's Tunji Akintoken, and you're probably wondering the title of my presentation to you, which is about navigating your career, which is belay versus carabiner. Now, I don't know if any of you know what a belay or a carabiner is, but for those of you that are mountaineers, I'll give you a quick, description of what the two items are, and then I'll see how I can make that relevant to you in your careers and things that you should consider doing as you navigate your career and hopefully get to your Everest. In terms of a brief introduction, I work for LinkedIn. I look after the UK and Ireland, and I look after our marketing solutions team. And essentially, if you know anything about LinkedIn, our vision is around creating economic opportunity to every member of the working workforce on this planet. And we do that by connecting businesses to schools, to people like yourselves. I'm sure many of you, just a quick hands up, how many of you are on LinkedIn? Fantastic. For the person at the back there, so we'll talk to them afterwards. But no, it's great to see, and I think hopefully you're getting benefit either through trying to find an opportunity, find a job, or just improving your education through our learning platforms, or even through just looking at different businesses to see how they're represented and whether it's the type of organisation you'd like to work for. So, just a very quick thing. So these two items are items that you use for mountaineering, and a belay is something that you use to go up and down a mountain, so you control your ascent or descent from a mountain. And a carabiner is actually what fixes to you. And the reason I use these two items as an analogy to your career is that you do need to understand that your career will take twists and turns and can go up and down. But probably more importantly, you should always have a focus and be fixed in terms of what your North Star is. And typically your North Star won't change in terms of how you navigate your career, but as you'll see as I go through this, your career will change. So you should be intent focused around what you want to do in your career, and I always say to people, either whether they're early in their career or mid-career or even late career, that you should really have a focus and be very intent-based about it. It shouldn't be a whim. It shouldn't be something that goes with the wind in terms of what seems to be fashionable at the time. So do take the time to make sure that you focus, but make sure it's intent-based. And as always now in this new world that we live in, it needs to be planned and you need to be agile. And the reason I say that is I'm going to share some data with you, for many of you in this room, and I'm sure many of you have a career or know what you want to do. But the one thing is happening at the moment is that, you know, your job is changing even if you're not changing jobs, okay? So I can tell you now, all of you in this room, on average, you will change your careers at least 3 to 4 times in your lifetime, no matter what you do. Even if you're a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer, you will change your job. The skills needed to do your job will change. I think we're all seeing the disruption that digitization is causing to every single job, whether you're a lawyer, and a lot of the contracts you might read are getting done by a bot or by AI to make it easier. But it doesn't mean that you'll be out of a job, and I think many people associate AI and automation with, oh, I'm going to lose my job, I won't have a job, robots will take over. That's not the case. It'll be more a case that your role and the skills that you need will change over time, where maybe creative thinking or maybe communication skills will be needed. And obviously what AI can't do is to look at things like ethical outcomes from decisions that need to be made. So I don't think that will be the case. I think AI will definitely enhance what we do. But as I'll share in this presentation, there will be a few careers that probably will need to be looked at in terms of way AI will maybe make them a lot easier, or maybe they will be disrupted. Now, I talk about having a career and being able to pivot. I'm on my 4th career. I started life out as an elite athlete. I then became a microelectronics engineer when I went to university. I actually studied. That's when I had hair. I wish for those days again, but they're not here anymore. So I worked as a technologist for many years, designing microprocessors, designing computer systems. I then pivoted from that to a different career, which is I spent the bulk of it for about 20 years being a business leader, which I still am today, but very much in the tech space, leading sales organizations globally. And I spent probably about 19 or so of those years at Cisco, which was at the start of the internet revolution, so I rode that storm quite well. And now I'm a marketeer. So I've had to relearn over the last 2 or 3 years as I've joined my, LinkedIn, which is owned by Microsoft, as many of you know. I've had to learn to be a marketeer. I've had to learn the language of marketeers. I've had to learn about advertising. I've had to learn about agencies. And that means I've had to go back to school. So I'm very much open to the fact that during my lifetime, and I'm probably at the end or towards the end of my career, after spending over 35 years in industry, that I'm kind of, probably hopefully this is the fourth and final one, but I'm open to the fact that my skills may be needed in another area and I may still have another career in me. So if I look at any of your LinkedIn profiles, and when we often look at our careers, we often think of them in respect to linearity. And you know, if you looked at my LinkedIn profile, it looks pretty impressive. It shows progression from being an engineer all the way through to being a business leader, leading, you know, different operations around the world. But what it doesn't show really is all the lateral moves, the demotions I've had during my career, and some of the challenges that we face. So all I will say to you is that be prepared during your career that it will not be linear. There will be speed humps, there will be obstacles in the way. And what I've learned over the last sort of 35 plus years in my career is that people that are successful are those that are able to navigate the turns. So be agile in your mindset, be open to the fact that your job may be disrupted and you may need to change careers. And probably the most important lesson I've learned is try and stay ahead of the curve. You know, don't wait for the outcome or the situation to come to you that you then have to react. Keep ahead of the market, see what's going on in the market, and if you feel that, well, actually, my industry is getting disrupted by technology or something, then take that as an opportunity to upskill yourself. Don't have to use LinkedIn's platforms, but there are many opportunities that your employers or others can actually find for you to be able to transition through careers. If I look at my wife, for instance, she actually studied to be an economist. She then made the move over to become a barrister. So you can change your career if that's what you want to be able to do, but you need to have an agile mindset to be able to do that. I thought I'd put this slide up here. It's not to scare you, but it's also to give you some hope that even with technologies, it's disrupting different areas. As I said before, I think the soft skills for me are ones that won't go away. So you should take, this is one of our reports in LinkedIn that we did about a year and a half ago. But as you can see, leadership, communication, problem-solving skills, management, time management, these are all soft skills that won't go away. And equally on the hard skills like accounting, sales and marketing, which is what I do now, business development, digital marketing, social media, no surprise, these are hard skills that won't go away anytime soon, no matter what AI will bring to these particular industries. So that's something that you should probably take to heart, that there's always an opportunity to see where the market's going, see what job roles are actually relevant in the market, but follow the market, because often people stay where they are, they don't necessarily move, and then they allow that industry or digitization to disrupt it, where they then feel that they're in a place where they can't get out of, which is not always the case. But it would be remiss of me not to say which jobs could be obviated by AI. And here's just a few here in terms of skills that may start to go away, and writing's a good one. And if you just, how many of you here, hands up, have used ChatGPT? There you go. See, over half of you here are already using it. So I think the art of writing will change in terms of that being a skill that you will necessarily need. I have to be honest, even when I write my LinkedIn posts now, if you actually go onto LinkedIn, there's an AI coach that will help you to write your posts as it learns more and more about you. So that will become easier, but it will also mean from a job perspective, you're more relevant because you can post, people see what you're posting about, and then they can see what they want to follow you for. But other things like music composition, and I think we've all seen I guess the news a few months ago where AI was creating music and we all thought it was Drake and it wasn't, and all the furor around that. That's why you're also seeing a lot of artists who have earned a living from writing music now selling their back catalogues, because I think they also see that I'll take the money now because maybe in the future I won't be able to monetize that in the same way I have in the past. So these are just some of the jobs here that will be obviated. It doesn't mean they'll disappear. They'll just be disrupted quite considerably in terms of what their value is in the marketplace. So what have I learned over the last 35, nearly 40 years? I've learned a few things, but I thought I'd just share them as maybe a takeaway of things that you should think about as you navigate through your careers. The first one is around IQ and EQ balance, and I'm sure you probably know what IQ is, and hopefully most of you know what EQ is, which is your emotional intelligence. As you go through your career, your IQ becomes less relevant. You may need it at times as you pivot careers, but actually what actually navigates and propels your career is actually your ability to have emotional intelligence, to understand how others may see you, how you show up, and then that be able to have empathy with them, but also to lead them. So that's something I've learned in my career journey, that I probably focus and double down a lot more on my emotional intelligence than I do on what I actually know, because you get to a point where you're not actually learning anymore. And there's a great book out there called What Got You Here Won't Get You There, which is a great book that kind of talks about how you can balance between the two. This is something a leader taught me years ago that I've always stood by: knowledge, confidence, and risk. Knowledge always gives you confidence, and when you have confidence, you have the ability to take risk. And when you take risk, that is often the difference between being good and being great. So take calculated risks, but they're normally built on a foundation of knowledge and confidence that gets you there. And that's often the differentiator, whether you're going for a job or a promotion or something, you want to pivot industries, that's often what makes the difference. And that risk part when you're pivoting your careers is something that's quite important. I don't need to tell any of you about networking, you're all here. But again, I challenge all of you, while you're here today, at least before you leave, meet 5 people that you don't know. And always network ahead of when you need that network. I work for LinkedIn, but even before I worked for LinkedIn, the amount of people that reach out for me to link and connect with me, often it's backed up because they're in a hole or something's gone wrong and they need help or they want some mentoring. I would prefer if people built that network up before they needed it, thinking that looks like an interesting person in my industry. Let me build that network and start to engage with that person ahead of when I need something, rather than I'm in a hole, I need some help, can you help me to guide me or coach me? So I think that's something you should all do, and hopefully all of you. How many of you here have met more than 3 people so far that you've not known before? Right, so that means about 75, 80% of you haven't. So that's one thing I'm going to ask you to do before you leave. You can live your life in very, very different ways, but I measure my life in what I do through the 3 E's: experience, exposure, and education. I'm not going to go into the detail of those, but if you think about it, education is not just knowledge and going to school or university, it's about what you learn from the world that we live in. Exposure is something that you should always look at in terms of how you raise your own profiles, but also in terms of how you learn new things. And experiences is pivoting your career sometimes. And I would challenge you now that if you're not doing something in your life that falls into one of those 3 buckets, you probably shouldn't be doing it, because it's not enriching you overall in your career or probably in your life generally. So everything I do is intent-based, and it normally falls into one of these 3 buckets. And if it doesn't, I don't do it. Self-awareness is a good one. I'm sure many of you are in the workplace. How many of you have done a 360-degree review at work? Not many, so many of you still got that to come. So an interesting prospect. Often when you get feedback from a 360-degree review, which is often about who you work with, who works above you, if you've got teams that you lead, often people that are working in other departments. The feedback from that can often be a bit of a challenge, because sometimes it's feedback that you don't want to hear, or it's not something, but feedback is a gift. And all I would say to you is that when you get that feedback, understand how you're showing up. And I've certainly learned that over my career, that I'm much more self-aware of how I turn up, and my own values and strengths, but also my areas of, I won't say weakness, but areas of opportunity to grow. And it doesn't mean you focus all your effort on what you're not good at, it just means that you're aware of it and you focus on your strengths and continue to double down on those. And differentiation. How many of you have got a purpose? Hands up. How many of you have a purpose in life and know what you want to do? So that's about 20, not even 20% of you. The rest of you, find out what you want to be famous for. What do you want to stand for? If I saw you in a room and said, right, Brian, I know Brian, so I'm going to use Brian as an example. We used to work together. Brian, if I'm out of the room and someone said to me, what's Brian like? I should be able to say, I know what Brian stands for. If you don't have that, take that as some homework. I'm probably old enough to tell you that. So just take it as some homework to do. What is my brand? What's my differentiation? Because you're in a world where there are lots of talented people in here. If I leave here, the people I remember are people that have told me what their purpose is and they have a brand, and I'll remember that. And probably one I don't need to tell anyone in this room, there will always be an unconscious bias. Not a challenge, you just need to be aware that it exists. And unconscious bias isn't something that's just with white people, it's also with black people. So we need to be aware of how unconscious bias plays out amongst ourselves, let alone how it plays out outside. And for me, I've always looked at unconscious bias as an opportunity. So when I walk in a room, and I often am at my level the only black person that walks in, I ensure that when I leave that room, I've dispelled any myths that people have or any preconceptions of me as a black man. And that's something I challenge you all to do, but you will always face it. Don't look at it as, oh God, I've got to do this, more microaggressions. Use it as an opportunity to switch it to our advantage. And the last one, which I challenge all of you to, and I do this to myself often, that's why I've changed my career 4 times, disrupt yourself rather than get disrupted. Do not let the environment around you dictate where you're going to get to, because often it will. The system will always dictate where you get to. So use it as an opportunity to be able to look at yourself, be self-aware, but also then challenge yourself to say, what do I really want to do? Where can I go with this? The best bit of advice I can give you is to spend as much time as possible planning where you want to go. People often want to get there faster to the yes, and I know the younger generations do want to get there faster to the yes, but take time to plan what you want to do before you do it. That's the one thing I will say. Over my career, I've made intent-based moves that have been planned, they've been looked at, and sometimes that's meant disruption, but I've done that to myself rather than allow a situation or a circumstance to do that to me. And skills will become more important as we go forward. I think in the old days when I was growing up, I'm from Nigerian heritage, you know, my family would say you have to go to university. It wasn't an option. But actually, that's not so much the case now. In a skills-first world, in the economy that we live in, the fact that you can look at apprenticeship degrees or apprenticeships or just go into work and learn those skills are more important. And the reason for that is very simple. When I left university, I learned a language at university, and I'm going to age myself here, called Pascal. It's a really old language. By the time I came out of university, the world had moved on. It was C++. It took another year or 2 years working to be retrained and upskilled to get there. So by the time you come out of university or wherever you've gone, often the skills you have are not fit for the workplace. When I worked at Cisco, we had a university, so we'd take graduates and then spend another year or 2 retraining them so they were fit for purpose for the market, because the technology is moving at such a rate. So all I would say to you is that try and acquire those skills first. When I did my A-levels, I also did a BTEC alongside it, and at that time, BTEC was probably not the thing most people wanted to do. There was a bit of a stigma attached to it. I don't think so. It was probably the most useful education I did. It was vocational, I got practical skills, and it really aided me when I went to university, because actually I had more practical experience of being able to understand my industry better than I would have got from the A-levels in pure and applied maths and physics that I did. So really focus on those skills, because I think over time they'll become more important. So finally, and I'm going to leave some time for questions, belay or carabiner. So you do need both, but there's probably 3 people that you'll need in your life. And I'm going back to the mountain analogy. These are some Sherpas here. But the 3 people that you will probably need in your life and you should plan to have are mentors, coaches, and sponsors. And the real trick is to know which one to use at the right time, which is exactly what you have to do in mountaineering. If you use the wrong tool at the wrong time, you do not get a predicted or necessarily a favorable outcome. So really pay attention to investing in these. Mentoring and coaching. Mentoring is probably easier because you can go and ask people that either mentor you. You may have to invest in a coach. There are a couple of coaches in this room that I can see. Invest in a coach. People often don't invest money in themselves. Pay for a coach to be able to help guide you and challenge you to reach your Everest. And finally, if you do those first 2 things, your sponsors will come. You won't have to seek a sponsor. Sponsors will come. They will see you working and they will advocate for you anyway when you're not in the room, when opportunities come up, because you've built your brand, your credibility, and people know that. So that's what I'll leave you with. And all I can say is that over my lifetime, by kind of following those guiding principles and kind of being, I'd say, agile and open to changing my skills over my career, has meant that I've been able to do quite a few cool things. And I've got a lot of other interests outside of it. So thank you for listening. I'm going to put some headphones on and I'm happy to take some questions.
Hi, my name's Sean. You advise building your brand on LinkedIn. So I'm a UX designer at the moment, but I want to kind of encourage other black women to get into UX design as well. So how would you say to build your brand on that?
Well, I think one of the first things you can do if you go into our LinkedIn Learning, there's some pretty good training around Rocky Your Profile. I think it's called Rocky Your Profile. I've got a few of my colleagues in the room, they're nodding. And there's also a few people in here who work for LinkedIn, and if you do your networking, you might be able to find who they are. Pointing over there. And they may be able to help you in terms of, we do run Rock Your Profile sessions internally at LinkedIn, our offices from time to time for groups, to be able to really get the best out of our platformers in terms of what the best practice is, you know, how you can make sure people are engaged, how you post better, how you follow people, how you basically build your brand and your profile. So there's definitely some education you can do as a first start, and then if you reach out to us, we can try and arrange a session. If you've got a group of women that you're kind of within the group and they need that, I can certainly arrange to get a session for some of our volunteers to do that for you.
Thank you so much.
No problem. There's a question over there.
Hi, thanks so much for this. So I wanted to know, as a person at the midpoint, or just kind of in the first few years of the midpoint of their career, it could feel like that next part could seem so far away. I feel like when you're a junior, that midpoint's a lot closer than you think. And then when you get to that midpoint, it feels like you can get into a bit of a rut and lose sight of what you're going for next. It could almost feel like if you go for new opportunities, they're kind of the same level even. So it feels like where's the growth? What's the growth opportunities to make sure you're still in line to move forward?
I think it's a good question, and I think I talk and mentor a lot of mid-career people in respect to that direction. They get to a point where they're stuck. I do strongly recommend you use a coach to be able to unlock where you want to get to. I think that's that's to the point I made earlier, is about using the right tool at the right time in your career. A coach is a good person to use mid-career in terms of when you're at that point where you're not sure what to do, you know, what to do next. You're getting stuck in a rut. But also, as I shared earlier, I think look at the skills in your industry, whatever you're doing, look at what's disrupting, what is actually accelerating or where you're seeing opportunity, and then be open to say, maybe I need to upskill or retrain in that area to be able to get some of those skills as well. But a coach is always good at this point when you do get there. I've been there, and certainly it was one of the most beneficial things I did.
Hiya, thank you for your talk. I'm Marianne from Deloitte. I want to know if you could possibly break down a few, or give us a few simple steps on how we should create a career plan. I know you touched on that we should get coaches and sponsors, mentors, etc. But just can you give us a quick general overview, please?
Yeah, sure. And I mean, there are plenty of templates that you can use to get started. But I think one of the areas I start with is, what are your interests and what are you passionate about? First and foremost, it doesn't mean that is where you're going to get to immediately, but you should have an end game or a North Star that, if there was no objects in the way, where would you like to get? And then from there you start to work backwards in terms of what gentle steps that you can take to be able to move towards where you want to get to. So you're at Deloitte at the moment. It's a multifaceted organisation. I used to work at PwC many years ago, well, not that long ago, but maybe 3 years ago. And you had 5 or 6 lines of business, from audit to tax to consulting. So you should spend your time probably internally just finding people to have a coffee within those different areas and understanding what parts of their businesses they have and what's of interest. Hopefully I find that when you have those conversations and spend that time networking and asking questions in that discovery mode, then you might find 2 or 3 things that spark your interest. Then you capture them and ask them, what stages do I need to take to start to get into that area? It could be a bit of shadowing, it could be a stretch assignment. I always find when you're working in professional services, cross-lob or cross-line of business projects are really a good way to look at what your next play is in terms of what you want to do next. So that would be, for me, probably a practical first step to take. And then in terms of templates, there are many online, but even within your workplace, I mean, if I take LinkedIn, we have something called a career action plan, which is you actually put down, you actually write it down, because I think also when you're talking about careers, you need to write it down, because as you write it down, it starts to manifest in terms of your thought process around the fact that this is something I want to do. So write down your objectives, what you'd like to do, and then start to work through it slowly but surely in a steady way, because you will change. You'll change and say, well, I'm going to do consulting. You might go down that route, and after a while you might think, actually, no, I actually like this over here in tax or in technology, and I'd like to pivot. And that's all part of the skills, being open to being able to do that. So pick a pivot point, start from there, explore it, discover it, spend time with people in those industries, and then use that to inform the steps that you need to take to be able to get there. That's probably a good practical first step. I think there was a question at the front, or was a couple.
Thank you, brother, for that amazing speech. Very inspiring. I just wanted to ask you, like with me growing up, I'm a very passionate person and I've got so many different passions and so many different interests. How am I, not even just me, but how are people able to navigate with their life in regards to, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do that, I want to do that. And I've got another question as well. Not only that, but how, because you said, you know, learning how to pivot with your careers. How am I supposed to know if I'm just bouncing from one thing to another, or if something's my actual true calling and I need to actually move towards that?
Okay. Well, on the first one, I can tell you now the big word is with an F, is focus. Pick one or two things. You can either be very good at one or two things, or you can be fairly mediocre at many. And I can tell you now, many of my young mentees that I mentor, that is one of the top questions we go through, is getting them to double down on maybe 2 or 3 areas rather than 7 or 8 fingers that they've got in different pies. And you need to do that. And I mean, it's quite hard, but again, writing it down is actually a good way, because when you actually talk to a mentee about it and then say, right, what are you really passionate about? Oh, you like music, so what are you doing in it? And you dig down, you might find, well, it's a superficial interest, but you might be quite a decent DJ, but it doesn't mean you're going to have a career in the music industry. And then you start to say, well, part that one from now, but actually over here with youth empowerment, you're really passionate and focused on that. Let's see what we can build out as a plan. So maybe 2 or 3 things to start with, and if you've got 7 or 8, get it down to 3. That's my challenge for you, and then just focus on those 3 for a period of time. In terms of knowing, whether you're stuck in something, I can tell you now you'll know, because you'll see your peers or people around you moving on, and then you'll start to question yourself, am I moving fast enough? Or I say, if you get up in the morning and your belly's not lit in that you really want to do that thing, or you're not passionate about it, you know what passion is, so don't do it. And again, I don't do anything that I'm not passionate about or I actually believe in. So question that, because sometimes people think they believe in something and that's what they want to do. And when you really probe them, then you find that actually it's not as deep as you might think. So in terms of knowing, I think you will know. I think it's something that you'll have to work on. But no, it's just one of those areas that I think people definitely find out quite quickly what they don't like. And then you just pivot away from it as quickly as possible.
Hey Tunji.
Brian.
Yeah, you're really inspiring to me. You know that anyway. But if there was a 5th career change for you, what would it be?
That's a fantastic question. So I already know what it is. So I upskilled last year, and I retrained as an executive coach. And I know that when I stop working in corporate life, that I will be an exec coach with a portfolio of non-exec roles. I'm a non-exec today, and that's what I'll be doing. That's kind of my 5th and hopefully final career move, because I should be able to do that maybe 2 or 3 days a month, and then I can play golf for the rest of it. So that's the plan. Right, I think I've got 30 seconds left, so I think we're pretty much done. Well, thank you again for your time, and enjoy the rest of TechFest.